Come on in. Hello. Hey, Anna. I think you recognize this song. Hey, Leela. Hey, Jim Flaherty. Come on in, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Hi. I hope you guys are enjoying a little jazz to bring you on in here today. Feel free to do a little wiggle in your seat if you're feeling it. All right. On that note, this is called Compared to What by Les McCann and Eddie Harris. My name is Carrie Cardinelli. Welcome to a fireside chat we're all excited about today, to have Chip and Seth here together with all of us live for an hour. Welcome. Please let us know in the chat, where are you in the world? And if you are new to MEA or an MEA alumni. So where are you in the world? Are you Planet 10? Seth is from. Excellent. I would like to head over there. Where are you in the world? Are you new to MEA? Are you an alumni? We've got London here. We've got the US here, all over the United States. Love it. Lots of alumni, lots of folks who are new. Great. So if you are new, we love doing these fireside chats. It's an opportunity for us to bring thought leaders to you in this Zoom format where you can ask questions, you can engage, we can see each other. So I hope you enjoy this. I'll be bringing up Chip here right now. And about halfway through the hour or so, Chip's going to open it up for questions. So you'll be able to put questions in the chat, but also you have a chance to raise your hand to come up and ask a question on stage. And you do that by clicking the reactions button where it has the raise your hand. Don't do it yet, because it'll just have your hand up for half an hour. So we'll tell you when to raise your hand. Meanwhile, keep your mute off as much as you can. You can keep your camera on. You can flip through on the gallery view to see each other as much as you like. And so without further ado, Chip Conley, you are in Baja right now. And it's really great to see you. Thank you for making the time to be here today.
Yeah. Well, Carrie, thank you. These online fireside chats would not happen without you. And we'll be back with you next week, a week from tomorrow, with one of my favorite people, Dacher Keltner, UC Berkeley professor, world's most famous thought leader on awe. And he lives within walking distance of our Baja campus. When the world's leading expert on awe lives in your neighborhood, you know you live in the right place. So hope to see you guys next week, 8 days from now. But I'm just so honored to bring Seth here again. Seth has addressed the MEA community before. I reached out to Seth because I knew he had a new book coming out, and I know what it's like to get a book out there and try to get the world to know about the book, and it can be sort of frustrating at times because you sort of want your friends to show up and say like, hey, I'm going to tell a few friends about your book. And so as a 40-year friend of Seth's, actually 42 years now that I think about it, 40 years ago, we graduated from business school, but it was 42 years ago that we met. I want to just say, Seth, thank you for showing up.
Oh, Chip, thank you. Thank you. Oh, where to start? So many things to talk about. So the book, wrong book, but we can start with this one. I don't know if people can see at home with who the authors are, but this book was sabotaged by Vanna White. And I think it's worth starting with that. For those of you from another land, Vanna White was the co-host of the show Wheel of Fortune, and her job was to spin the spinner. And this was our first book, me and Chip. And we came out of the gate all filled with optimism. And our editor was also bringing out Vanna White's autobiography. And he had a crush on Vanna White. So our book, nothing happened. Crickets. And if we had just said, well, that didn't work and gone home, neither one of us would be here today.
Yeah.
The fact is, better is possible. And we don't have a minute to waste. So that is my mantra for today. This is actually the new book, but I'm not here to sell the book. I'm here to talk to my hero and mentor and friend, Chip. How are you? Hi.
Seth, you know, you're prolific. There've been times along the way when as I've said in past online fireside chats with you, I keep following you. You start a daily blog, I start a daily blog. You become an author, I become an author. You get bald, I get bald. I mean, you go vegan, I try it. I start a vegan restaurant. Long story short is you have been a hero of mine as well. I want to just start by talking about the books. You've 21, 22 books, something like that at this point. Um, which of your books are you most proud of? Which of all of the books you've written, which are the ones that most speak to you as like, that one is going to stand the test of time, and I really appreciate it.
Well, there's a special kind of ordinary author whose favorite books are the ones that didn't sell, because we fall in love with them and try to come up with reasons why, and we worked hard on them. There are other books that I have that I actually listen to on audio at least once a year, because I need to hear from that other version of me. And I really strongly recommend, if you're not an author, you make one of those books on a day when you're having a particularly good day. Make yourself a half-hour book with your dreams and your learnings, and then you can listen to it and put yourself back into that state. So for me, the book Survival Is Not Enough, which was arguably my most egregious failure as a real author, the foreword by Charles Darwin, I deleted 100,000 words from the book. That's how many words there were when I was busy writing it 8 hours a day for a year. And it helped me start to think like an author, and it helped me start to see systems. But I don't listen to that book. The Practice and The Dip are books that come back on my audio. And the book probably that I'm most grateful for is Purple Cow, because I was kicked out of the book publishing industry before this came out. I self-published it. And that's a good lesson that it's worth reminding myself. It doesn't matter where you come from. It matters where you're going.
And Purple Cow, I think you referenced Joie de Vivre as a Purple Cow company. And interesting, purple has been referenced a lot this week. What happened to all the purple states? All the purple states went a different direction. I want to call out your book, The Carbon Almanac, and let people know about that, because a lot of people don't know that about that book and about your affection for our
Being
Earth
alive
on so many different levels. And I the whole time I've known you, you have been like this. Talk about that book, if you don't mind. And what's your perspective? Well, this is as political as we'll get during this conversation, about the fact that climate change got almost no attention this year in the presidential debates and discussions.
Okay, so I need to clarify a couple of things. The first is I'm not a vegan, but I haven't had meat in 40 years. But I don't want to take credit for that I don't deserve. Number two, I am not the author of this book. I am the founding editor of this book. I have 1,900 co-authors. And that's important because it's part of the point. One of the things that we know about government is government doesn't lead in many areas, it follows. And when people come together and take community action, government either has to follow or get out of the way. And it's very tempting to give up hope, and very tempting to just push the responsibility away, because it's so obvious what needs to happen. But we need to make it happen. And it shouldn't be that way, but it's true, and it's always true. So the reason the Carbon Almanac exists is I wrote my first blog post about climate 17 years ago, and it didn't solve the problem, amazingly. And I realized I hadn't been blogging about it, talking about it very much. And that's because I felt like a hypocrite, and because I felt underinformed. I later discovered the reason I felt like a hypocrite is because British Petroleum wanted me to. They invented, with Ogilvy and Mather, the term carbon footprint. They invented it to make everyone on this call feel guilty, that we should take care of our own carbon footprint before we talk about anything else. And the underinformed thing is because there's a lot of statistics and bad graphs and confusing misinformation, and people want us to feel paralyzed. So this project, which I worked on for a year and a half as a full-time volunteer, changed my life. It helped me find solace and other people who I could journey with. So the book itself, and Chip as someone who's made books, this is a 97,000 word illustrated, footnoted, fact-based compendium. And we did the whole thing in 5 months and we didn't make one mistake. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't in charge. I just created the conditions for it to happen. And what that taught me is that better is possible if we can come together and create community action in whatever form. And so that book's gone on to be translated into 5 or 6 languages, been a bestseller around the world. And none of us ever made a penny from it. We did it to have a conversation happen. That got me thinking about strategy. And that's what led me to this, because we make decisions. That's what everyone on this call does. We don't dig ditches for a living. We make decisions. And often we have no idea how or why we're doing that.
So let's talk about the new book, because the title of it is similar to another book you had, which is This is Marketing. But this is Strategy. How did this book get gestated? How did it gestate? How did it get created in the first place? And where's it coming from in terms of, especially relative to This is Marketing?
So I'm guessing that one of the characteristics of becoming an elder is you start to make decisions about what you want to do, not what you have to do. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I had to write a book or I didn't get paid. That my job was to wake up in the morning and think of a book. When I was a book packager, we sold 120 books in 10 years, a book a month. In order to sell a book a month, I was inventing a book a day. And that became my practice, my work. That went away a bunch of years ago. That the act of publishing a book is so ridiculous and such an extraordinary boondoggle compared to, like, make a blog post. You reach 100 times as many people, you're done. You don't have to spend a year on it. So book only occurs when I feel like I have no choice. And what happened to me this time is I was thinking about the people in my life, friends, colleagues, people who run nonprofits, Secretary of State, and everyone in between, who were coming to me with what they said was a marketing problem, but they didn't have a marketing problem. They had a strategy problem. They were making bad decisions before they even got started on the marketing part. And I just started writing them a note, and I couldn't stop writing. And once I was like 50 pages in, I thought, oh, I bet a bunch of people could use this. And then foolishly, I said, all right, I'll go spend a year to bring it to people.
So define strategy for us, because, it feels like a pretty amorphous term. And what are some of the misconceptions on strategy that people have that you debunk in this book?
Well, the biggest one is that most people think they know what strategy is, but actually they think they're thinking about tactics. Tactics are the plan. So Roger Martin has said, look, you can't do strategic planning because that implies that when you do all the steps, it will work. But you're dealing with the future here. It might not work. So strategy is about seeing the future from a distance, making assertions about what it rhymes with, challenging yourself to think about what are the useful proxies, not the false proxies, not looking at the things that are easy to measure, but the things that are worth measuring. And then be able to describe it to another smart person and say, I see this, and if we do things like this, then I think that might happen. And this is really hard emotionally, because it might work and then you're on the hook, or it might not work and then you're on the hook. It's so much easier to just do your job. So much easier to just say, I'm using my intuition, than to name it. And so, all that time in business school, they hinted as to what strategy was, but they never actually talked about it. And when you see someone who has an elegant strategy, it's really clear. What the way you can tell if someone's a good surfer is they pick good waves. And if you're constantly flailing, it might be because your strategy is wrong and you're surfing on the wrong beach.
So, okay, let's be concrete then. What are some examples of companies or individuals in the world who have embodied some of the principles you outline in this book?
Well, so an easy one to talk about is Microsoft. They had a strategy starting the first week they were founded. And their strategy was, we were going to be the IBM of software. Because what it meant to be the IBM of hardware is no one ever got fired for buying IBM. You don't have to have the fastest computers or the best computers. You just have to have enough support around it, enough VARs, enough manual, all that stuff, that it's the obvious choice. And every time Microsoft does that, they do great. When they get confused and chase something else, not so much. That a strategy isn't a slogan. It's a resilient way to keep ourselves on the path. And, the Elder Academy has its strategy in its title, which is, we're just going to begin by betting that every day everyone's going to be a day older. And that there's a significant number of people who are going to come to the realization each day that they need to learn a new way, that they need to find a new sort of wisdom, and they need to reconnect with where they're going. That's your strategy. Your tactic is, let's open a place over here or over there, or offer this program or that program. Tactics are important, but first you need a strategy. And if you guys come out with a line of coffee, I will tell you, you have lost your strategy.
What about people like Richard Branson or Donald Trump, who come out with all these different brands around Virgin or Trump? I mean, obviously some of them don't work, but there's sometimes people extend their brand into all kinds of crap.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about Richard Branson. Richard Branson's marketing strategy is that celebrity is an asset that is underused in commerce. And he will jump off a building, show up in any media opportunity, write his autobiography multiple times and not even read it before it comes out. And his personality is the promise. It's an alternative to television advertising. And so by putting his name / the word virgin on anything he touched, he was saying, if you're the kind of person that makes a decision based on celebrity familiarity, this is for you. And so people didn't buy Virgin Cola because it was more delicious, and they didn't fly Virgin Air because it had a more comfortable seat. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But because the identity he was able to build at no cost to himself, except emotional, was easily applied to lots of spaces, right? That's a brand. A brand isn't a logo. A brand is the promise. And the promise is, you're probably not going to have an absolutely horrible time and get ripped off, because Richard doesn't want to risk that. Mm-hmm. And there are other personalities who are sort of famous whose brand stands for the opposite of that. And the truth is in the fact that their products always fail.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other examples of companies or individuals that you want to cite that would help us to understand this is strategy?
Sure. Jacqueline Novogratz started the Acumen Fund, which is a groundbreaking charity. I was there the year she started it, and I think the first year she had $1 million or $2 million. Strategy is simple. Let's invest in entrepreneurs that do business with the poorest people on earth. Because if you are treating someone who makes $4 a day as a customer, you have to give them dignity. You have to make what they want, or they won't buy from you. As opposed to the endless emergency of poverty of just giving things to people, serve them. And last time I checked, they had changed the lives of more than 500 million people and raised almost $500 million. And it's this multiplier effect. So there's 120 million people on earth who have light at night just because they funded a company that made solar lanterns. And when those solar lanterns didn't work, the company had to make them better. They couldn't say, take it or leave it, because they had customers. So the strategy persists, even though the projects shift over time. If you are a musician and your strategy is to stay on with the ears of new generations, then Herbie Hancock had a 50-year run that made perfect sense. Start with Miles Davis and work all your way up to Rocket, right? And be an MTV star when all his peers in jazz said, what are you doing? And Herbie said, no, my job isn't to keep reperforming Miles Davis songs. My job is to figure out what the next generation where they want to go next and do that. So these are all strategies that we can repeat over and over again, even though we change our tactics.
You in the book, again, I have not seen the book. I'm in Baja, came out recently. It's hard to get things delivered here. You talk about smallest viable product.
Audience, smallest
audience.
viable audience. Yes.
So talk about that. I mean, most people, when they're thinking about a new product or service, they're not really focused on the smallest. They're looking at the minimum viable product or the maximum. What's
Yes.
the TAM, the total addressable market?
Right.
So talk about this, starting with something small.
Yes. So there are two parts to this. I'm really glad we're talking about it. The first part is this: when you pick your customers, you pick your future. If you decide to cater, you're a wedding photographer at the highest high end, you're going to spend all of your days with anxious, spoiled brides and grooms. If you want to do that, that's fine. You picked your customers, you're picking your future. The second part of it is what we have to realize is even the most successful products and services in the world don't reach everyone. You don't need anything close to everyone. So my book hit number 2 in business books the first week out. And I reached 0.0000001% of the world, right? That when you add all my books together to a rounding error, I have 0% market share in the United States. The same way, when Joie de Vivre was doing great, almost no one who went to San Francisco stayed in one of your hotels. Almost no one. It's fine, right? And even Airbnb, almost no one was staying in Airbnb when they were hitting their peak, because that's enough. So you get to pick who it's for. You get to say, I'm a comedian and I work for these kinds of audiences who speak this language and who like this kind of joke. And if someone comes up to you afterwards and said, you swore too much, or you didn't tell long stories, you say, it wasn't for you. I'm here for those people.
My first hotel that I ever created, the Phoenix, was a hotel that Seth said to me, it wasn't for me, because it was a rock and roll hotel in a bad neighborhood. And, it wasn't for you. I hear you. And yet what I want to sort of drill down on a little bit is what you're talking about is niche, a niche business. And Joie de Vivre, my boutique hotel company, definitely specialized on this. We had 52 boutique hotels, each based upon a different magazine and 5 adjectives. We were in the business of creating identity refreshment because you are where you sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Now that worked, but when Hyatt ultimately bought my company, they have not known what to do with it because they don't like niche strategies, because their point of view is everything needs to be big and replicable. And so it's been really hard for them to know what to do with this brand that I spent 24 years, love, sweat, and tears into, because their point of view is, well, why don't we just replicate something over and over again? Correct. Which is ultimately what Ian Schrager did with Delano and Mondrian, and what Kimpton did with Palomar and Monaco. So is there
I'm never comfortable correcting you, but I have to.
Please.
Hyatt is a niche business, and so is Starbucks. Almost no one has been to Starbucks. Maybe all the people we know have been to Starbucks.
Right.
But they're a niche, and the niche is for a certain kind of privileged upper income person who's in a pre-caffeinated condition and is too lazy to make a cup of coffee at home and wants to be in a building with other people doing a thing that they get to do every day. That's what we offer. That is a very specific niche. And the problem that Hyatt has is, and I've done this riff before, but you brought up Hyatt, so I'm going to do it again. Yep. Hyatt doesn't have a brand. Hyatt has a logo. Nike has a brand. And the difference is, if Nike owned a hotel, you know exactly what the Nike hotel would look like. Mm-hmm. But if Hyatt came out with a line of running shoes, we have no clue what it would be like. Because all Hyatt's got is, oh, you're looking for a place to sleep that's sort of upscale, quiet and dark? That's us. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, when the world changes, and it always does, if you stand for the mediocre middle, you got troubles.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can replicate once you figure out who you're keeping your promise to and if there are other people like that in the world. The problem that Hyatt has is they don't want to stand for much of anything. And there are plenty of hotels that do that we would miss if they were gone. If Hyatt went away, other than the people who have a lot of points, nobody would miss it.
Okay. Yes, and the point they want us to get addicted to our points. So I want to sort of explore for a second about the dip. I want to come back to, because that book has been mentioned to me twice in the last 2 weeks. I'm teaching here at our MEA Baja campus right now with Herminia Ibarra, who wrote a book called Working Identity. So we have 30 people in this workshop, all of whom are in the process of career transition. And so the book, The Dip, has come up once with one person this week and one last week. I want you to just talk about the premise behind the dip, because I have to tell you that in the 7 years that we've had an MEA now, and we've got some momentum and things are going well, and I really appreciate this deeply, connected community we have with 68 regional chapters around the world. Is it 58 or 68? I don't know. I tend to I tend to have hyperbole. So let's assume it's 58 for a second. So long story short is there have been times in the 7 years, especially during COVID, but also when we were having some internal troubles about like, okay, who's in charge of this and that. There's been times when I've just felt like I'm in the dip right now. How do you know when you're in the dip that it's not forever and that it's going to come back? Like I just think there's so many of us who feel that way, whether it's as an entrepreneur or whether it's in our career as well.
Okay, so let's talk about it conceptually first. And part of our goal is to create value. And what makes something valuable? Let's think about the gym. After Christmas, gyms are very crowded in January and February. And sometime around February, people stop going. And they stop going because it's a grind, because it's a hassle, because it's expensive, because it's dark and it's early in the morning. They forgot about Christmas, all of these things. That's a dip. That's why six-pack abs are rare. They're rare because
especially at our age, let's just be honest.
Especially at our age, yes.
They're more expensive. A six-pack gets more expensive as you get older.
And we value the six-pack because someone had to go through, unless they were born that way, someone had to go through trouble to get it. Medical school is a dip on the way to being a doctor. If everyone was a doctor, doctors wouldn't make enough money to buy 3 Mercedes, but they do generally in the US because there aren't that many doctors. The reason there aren't that many doctors is because of organic chemistry and how many seats there are in medical school. So when organic chemistry comes along, don't be surprised. That's a feature. That's the thing that's separating people who care enough to go do this from people who don't. And so the reason for the book is to say to people, don't start a project unless you have enough resources to get through the dip. Either quit before you start or stick it out to the other side. However, there are projects where there is no other side.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
The ridiculous example I give in the book is emphysema. You cannot smoke your way through emphysema. There's just no way out of that thing you're doing. What I suggest to people is this. Has anyone before you ever gotten through a dip like this one? Or are you saying, I am here to change the world in a brand new, unique way, and it's never been done before? I'm in favor of that, but I don't think it's going to work. So just know that you're doing this pioneering work. For the rest of us, there's this understanding that maybe there isn't another side. So I'll give you an example from my online learning institution. So I started the Akimbo workshops in the Alt MBA. We grew to 80,000 students. We ended up graduating, I can't remember whether it's 5,000 or 10,000 Alt MBA students through the years. But as the world shifted, I discovered that the first dip I made it through, which is how do I have one cohort that's good enough that the alumni get me a second cohort? How do I put together the pieces to do that. That was a dip. Lots of people tried to do that, but their stuff wasn't able to get to the other side. But then the next dip that showed up is this. There were a bunch of people who trusted me and who were paying attention to my work, and I could work my way through the adoption curve and serve them. But the next dip was I would need to spend millions of dollars on Facebook ads. I would need to act like masterclass. I would need to dumb down the classes. I would need to make more vivid promises to get to the next tranche of people. And I looked at what that dip would require. I would need to go out and raise $5 or $10 million. I would need to hire 20 or 30 people. And I would need to set up projects I wasn't quite as proud of to get to the other side. And I knew it was ahead. I couldn't work my way through it on my own. So I stopped because I said, that's not why I did this. And that dip is too hard to get to the other side. And so I've had a lifetime of projects, hundreds of projects. And what I try to do is find the sweet spot where there's a dip I can get through that other people might not. And then on the other side, there's something that is probably worth it. But then at great expense to me, I walk on to the next project because I have a short attention span, as opposed to going to do the next dip. And it is possible to go through several dips on your way to something of real scale. That's a choice, but you should see the dips along the way.
So it's sort of like you want on the highway, the signage that's going to tell you, hey, beware of the dip, because at least you won't react to it. You'll sort of say, okay, I'm getting prepared for this.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Well,
supposed to be like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, midlife, that's good advice for midlife too. The midlife crisis is just a dip. And you know what? We all go through it. It's not really a crisis. It's a chrysalis.
Right. It's only a crisis if you deny it's a dip.
That's right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So in a moment, we're going to open this up for Q&A and have people start raising their hands. So if you want to raise your hand, go down to the react button or the heart down there. And you are able to ask a question. But let me ask a question before we go there. So Seth, I've known you for 42 years. Oh my God, it's crazy, crazy. And your birthday's in July, mine's in October. We both born in 1960. We joined Stanford Business School when 21 and 22 years old. You were wise beyond your years back then. And you are even more so now. If you look back, since MEA is a wisdom school, and we're in the business of helping people to cultivate and harvest their wisdom. And I have some strong opinions on how do we help people create wisdom management practices that help them to. How are you wiser today than you were 20 years ago? In what parts of your life do you feel like you're wiser as a result of your life experience?
I love that you're using the word wisdom and that you're using it in such a generative way. And I think that a huge contribution that you are making, even for people who don't enroll, but they should enroll, is getting people to even think about wisdom. So I would share two. The first one is, I think many people in business school wouldn't describe me as wise beyond my years. They would describe me as a wise ass beyond my years. And I was trying to fill an unfillable hole for a long time. And seeking to do that is enervating and ultimately a dead end. And the second biggest piece of wisdom, which my parents taught me, but which took a long time for me to embrace, is it's easy to talk about our privilege, but when you look really hard in the mirror, you realize just how much you have. And in the work I've done with Acumen and in other places, it's very clear to me that this isn't about, quote, giving back, because that's such a weird expression. It's simply time is short and better is possible. And we need to own our work. We need to be able to say, I only get tomorrow once, and I want to be proud of how I did it, not because I'm trying to fill an unfillable hole, but because I can, and therefore I have to.
Seth, what was excuse me, what was the unfillable hole you were trying to fill?
Validation from people who I thought were my peers.
Got it. Got it. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to some questions.
As you're teeing up the question, I can't, I have a short attention span. I saw that Rena asked the question about decision making. So I'm going to answer that while you figure out who you want next.
Go for it.
I knew Danny Kahneman. I don't actually reference Danny Kahneman in the footnotes, but I do have a whole section about Annie Duke. If you haven't read Annie Duke's work on decision making, it is profound. And we'll do a small little exercise here. Please go ahead and type into the chat if in the last 6 months you made a good decision. If you did, just write yes in the chat. Terrific. Next question. That decision you made in the last 6 months that was a good decision, did it turn out well? As you can see, pretty much everyone says yes. And what Annie teaches us is that has nothing to do with whether it's a good decision. If you buy a lottery ticket and you win, that's a good outcome and it's a bad decision. Buying a lottery ticket is always a bad decision. That what makes something a good decision is not that it had a good outcome. It's that based on what you saw and what you had and what you know, you made a choice that you would make again, regardless of the outcome. And learning to make good decisions, like when Annie taught me that, it just blew me away.
Beautiful. All right. So let's start with Rusty. Thank you for, I hope you're not driving, Rusty. You've pulled over to the side.
Yeah, I'm in the Tesla.
Okay.
In park. I'm not self-driving. Thanks, Elon, for the piece there. First of all, thank you both so much for connecting and making this time. I know 40 years is not something you lose track of, connections like this, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, Seth, I've been following you for probably 5-6 years, not that long. Tim Ferriss, Andrew Huberman, Mark Divine, Rich Roll, I think was one of my favorite ones. I'm a 33-year Army vet. So talk about unfillable holes. I've got tons. How do you find people like you guys? Everybody who's on here. I live in Austin, Texas. I bump into one in a beautiful serendipitous moment, but I want to work for the rest of my life with people who understand time is short and better is possible every day. And I can't find them if I'm not like married or I didn't produce them. So, and my wife doesn't want to work with me. She wants me to hire her, pay her.
So we've got a short time together, so I'll just chime in and I'm sure Chip will add something. The way Chip and I met is he put a note in my mailbox at Stanford along with 3 other people. And he organized a circle of people who met every week in the anthropology department on Tuesdays. And it changed my life. No question, it changed my life. So the first thing I would say to you is you find people all the time who have a spark, but you're just walking past them as opposed to inviting them into a circle of mutual benefit. And the second thing that I would say is we can create the conditions for people to become the sort of wise folks who are looking for a longer arc. And, Chip and I were talking about the fact that business school is terrible at that, or at least it was. So what are you going to start, or what are you going to contribute to, or what group are you going to be part of that creates those conditions? And only one person, maybe 2, started Alcoholics Anonymous. And no one knows who's in charge. And it's not anonymous. People talk about it all the time. But it's spread everywhere, creating the conditions for a certain kind of behavior. This is so much easier now than it was 50 years ago. And we're wasting our chance to do it.
Thank you, Rusty. Thank you. Hope to see you at MEA one of these days, because there's a lot of good people here for you to meet. Let's go to Demetrius, and Todd, you're going to be next, but only if you have your video on. There you go. Demetrius, great to see you.
Thanks for having this. Trying to keep to time. Seth, you said almost at the beginning of this conversation it was foolish for you to spend a year writing this new book. I was curious for you to unpack that more.
It was foolish by almost every measure to spend a year publishing a book. I write books all the time. I think writing a book is great for me and generative when I share it with other people. The reason it's worth doing all of this is because when someone touches it, they feel like they have made a different sort of commitment than if they click on a link. And so by foolish, I mean, if you value my time, it is something that used to make sense 60 years ago, but is as a form of media is harder and harder to justify. But the fact is there's still a bunch of people who this can change things. And I hear from people 5, 10, 20 years later, I read that book, but I almost never hear from people who say, I listened to that podcast ad. And that's shifting, but I still want to celebrate the Proustian value of a book.
Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Demetrius.
Demetrius. Let's go to Todd.
All right. Well, first time on Fireside, longtime Seth Godin fan. So I'll lead with that. I'll just keep my question quick. I'm really fascinated with your idea of strategy, and it's one of those practices that you can get consumed where your project becomes the strategy of the project. And so my question is, how long do you spend on strategy versus just getting your product or your project launched and getting feedback?
Okay, so there's two parts to this. The first one is committees are terrible at strategy, and I don't think you should have meetings about your strategy. I think a strategy that's new begins with the sentence, this might not work, which lets you off an emotional hook. And then you describe something. And then if it holds up to any sort of stress test, sure, go build something. But that thing you're building and putting into the world, now you're testing your tactics. If that thing you put in the world the first time doesn't work, it's not because your strategy was wrong. It's because your tactics may not have matched your strategy. If you find enough evidence that well-executed tactics still don't work, now there's something wrong with your strategy. Does that make sense? So yes, this idea of the minimum viable product and customer traction and customer feedback is critical, but that's a separate conversation from we can tell people what a strategy is. One of the challenges of Silicon Valley is over the last 20 years, the strategy was raise some money and then let's go. And that's not a strategy. That's just raise some money.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Got it. Beautiful. Let's go to Kate.
Hi there. Hey, thanks for talking with me.
Hi, Kate.
Great to meet you guys. Seth, I stumbled across you a few years ago, not that long ago, because of your book, What to Do When It's Your Turn. I love that book so much, I have to
Me
tell
too.
you.
Thank you.
And I think the subtitle is, and it's
always your turn.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess it was fitting because I was in the moment where I felt like it was my turn. So I'm in the process of trying to brand and launch a book that I published at the beginning of 2020. And it was, with COVID and whatnot, but it's basically, it's an ABC book for the soul, where each of the 26 letters of the alphabet is a concept that.
Yep, I wrote a book just like that. I hear you. So what can I help with? Uh-oh, we're losing Kate.
Kate.
We lost her.
Kate, we've lost you. All right, Kate.
Came up my life coaching. Did I freeze? No?
Kate, go ahead and type your question in the chat and we'll do our best to answer.
Kate, go ahead and put it in the chat and we will go to.
I think I froze.
Yeah, I think it's freezing. So go ahead and write it in the chat. And to my team, go ahead and mute Kate because she's coming in and out. Let's go.
Well. Okay.
Thank you, Kate. Go ahead and put the question in the chat.
So if you can hear me.
I can't, Kate, we're trying to mute you where I'm not able to mute you. We just
It came out of my
in the chat. I can't mute her. I don't know what's
my
going on.
life coaching practice when I recognize that people were lacking a certain.
Hey, Kate.
There we go.
Okay. You've left and you're coming back.
Hi, Britt.
All right. So let's go to Senbei in Japan.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
we have Brit up, Chip.
We
We've
got
got Brit
Brit.
up already.
Brit's on.
Oh, you have
Brit's
Brit
in
up?
the on
Okay.
Yeah,
deck
Brit's
circle.
up.
Brit. Go for it, Brit.
Oh no, she's on mute. We've been cursed.
How do we unmute
There
her?
we go.
Unmute myself. Oh,
Yes,
hi, can you hear
done.
me?
Hi, Brit. What's up?
Hi, Seth and Chip. Thank you. Great honor. Seth, I'm a marketing professional and you've been very influential in my career and especially linchpin. So thank you so much. My question really aligns to what you said about strategy versus tactics. I've studied strategy. It's been a primary goal of my career. I'm currently working as special projects manager for a digital agency, and I run up against this all the time, where many of my colleagues and the CEO don't understand the difference between tactics and strategy. And we're continually trying tactic after tactic, throwing spaghetti at the wall, throwing more spaghetti at the wall. And I find myself philosophically at odds sometimes, wanting to encourage people to think differently, but it just isn't sort of baked into the organization. So my question is simply this: after 2 years, is it worth sticking around to try to teach people the difference and to create change, or is it time to find a place where that's already part of the ethos?
What a lovely question, and so perceptive on your part. What does your agency get paid to do? Do they get paid to do tactics and throw things at the wall, or do they get paid when things work?
We are a digital marketing website and software and apps. So we really do specialize in tactics.
So I wouldn't be surprised if the system gets what the system is getting paid to
Okay.
do, right? And I think before I left, I would invest some cycles to build out the infrastructure conceptually of what it would look like if you were a strategy shop, not a tactics shop. And then I would have an honest conversation with the CEO and say, look, I can go build a strategy shop right next to us and let's do it together, or I'll leave. But you need, part of the idea of the book is, can we just talk about this? Let's have an honest conversation. So I made this deck, and it's 5.2 million combinations of strategies, and you play 4 cards and it shows you how they juxtapose. And what you'll see when you take it out is people want to touch it and then they put them down, and either they get it or it really, really bothers them because they don't want to talk about strategy. They want the world to stay the way it was, and they like the craft of trying the next thing. And you're absolutely right. That's not a dip. That's a dead end. If you don't have the power to change it and they're not open to hearing about what's on the other side, you don't get tomorrow over again. Go do it somewhere else.
Thank you, sir. Great honor. Very much
Thanks, Britt.
appreciated.
Beautiful. Thank you, Britt. Let's go to Japan, to Senbei. And what time in the morning is it, Senbei?
About 5:45 in the morning.
5:45. Okay, that's
Yeah.
not too bad.
Thank you very much for today. I'm happy to be here. I read your books and in Japanese, of course, in Japanese.
Thank you.
Yeah, but today I learned the importance to create my brand and gain trust. To gain trust, and of course, I think wisdom and experiences are very important for the elder people. But how to from future more, how should we do to create our own brand for the next midlife?
So how do you create a personal brand? Is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
right.
Senbei?
Yes, right.
Steph.
All right, so all a brand is a promise. It's what do we expect from you when you walk in the room? What is the implied promise of working with you? And people have a brand if they have temper tantrums. They have a brand if they're always late. They have a brand if they bring first-rate work the first time you ask them to do something. We have brands in our family and we have brands in our community. So the way you build a brand is by becoming the thing that people expect you to be when you make the promise. And the way people remember your brand is when it's not just what's expected. So, the brand of one bank's ATM versus another is nothing because you put your card in and money comes out. So there's no surprise. Where brands are built is when we surprise people. So there's a legend from the early days of FedEx when a FedEx driver on his own decision, used the company credit card to charter a helicopter to get across a frozen mountain pass to deliver a $15 FedEx package. And whether or not it's true, it's the kind of legend that builds a brand. FedEx today would never do anything like that, but it established what their promise meant. So we pick our promises and keep them in a remarkable way, then our brand gains currency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sembe. Great to see you. Thanks for being up early. Christy.
Sorry about that. Hello, Seth and Chip. So I have two quick things. So Seth, as you were talking about, Chip said you were wise when you were young, and you said, I'm kind of a wise ass. I would reflect.
I tried to use the past tense, but if you want to call me a wise ass now.
I would also reflect that you're a truth teller. That I think that's that wisdom that you speak of, Chip. Like, you tell the truth, and you also take kind of complex or concepts and distill them down, just like you did with the last question. And so I just want to reflect that back, that your work is so impactful for that reason. And then I am a strategic planner, so I'm looking forward to your book and the deck. And I wanted to also share that I use your blog post, "Busy is not the point," almost every time. Like, I have given that out over 100 times. And so just interesting to see how your work translates. And then also your book, Graceful. I'm the one who just wrote the book, Grace in the Workplace. So I wanted to thank you for that too. So we exchanged emails, whether you read them or not, but
I read everyone. I have no staff. Thank you for doing that. I want to talk about the boiling down thing, because something just occurred to me. There's an old joke that if you ask a consultant what time it is, they will teach you how to build a watch. And if you ask me what time it is, I will ask you why you want to know what time it is. Because it might be that you don't really want to know what time it is.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Kate came back with a question that is, we'll have you answer, and then we'll go to Evan.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for an author who wants to not just sell books, but to create a movement?
Right. So it begins by writing a book that helps you create a movement. And most books don't do that because that's not their job. And then the second thing is to create the conditions for the book to be the souvenir of the conversation associated with the movement. So it's very hard to get someone to buy a book now, because there's so much else we can do with our money and our time. But if the book itself is the tool that people are going to use to enlist other people in where they're going, the way Atomic Habits did, then you're going to sell 15 million copies, because the single best way to help your friends get better habits is to buy them a copy of Atomic Habits. The book itself is the messenger. And that's different than the book being the destination. And when I was a book packager, I made lots of books that were the destination. Those books are much harder to sell now than they used to be.
Mm-hmm. And Seth was one of the first to just realize people do not read the last chapters of your book. You need to shorten it, fewer words, etc., etc. I learned that from Seth. And another thing I learned was that Evan Schlesinger is a good friend, and I got to see him at our Stanford Business School reunion a couple of weeks ago. Evan, part of our entrepreneurial group. Great to see you.
How are you? My wife was talking about you 2 days ago.
No way.
Yeah.
Seth, it's been a long time.
Good to see you.
I've been following you for 40-something years. The camp was probably the most impressive thing I think that you've ever done, the yo-yo dine. But I have to ask you, is there anything that you've wanted to do that you haven't done, and what is it?
I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. So wanting to do something, the question is, am I amusing myself or am I committing myself to this journey? So I almost started a chocolate company. That's one reason why there's the collectible chocolate bar that came with the new book. And then I met Sean Askinosie, and he's a better person than me. And I realized I could probably have fun marketing chocolate and make sales that he wouldn't make, but I wouldn't help the chocolate farmers as much as he is. Committing to a 20-year journey and getting on a plane and going to the Philippines and the Ivory Coast and Colombia, I couldn't do that. So there are things that I thought would be fun to try on for a little while, but I didn't want to get through the dip. And I've just been really lucky that dips that I could get through, I've had the option. And sometimes I've said no, but I don't find the regret to be much of a fuel. So I don't have a really good answer. I wish I did, but it's a super delightful question. Thank you, Evan.
All right, we can talk about what's next. And if I remember, you built a brick pizza oven in your backyard too, didn't you?
Well, two. The first one was a total failure. And this is another interesting thing about how easy it is to learn these days. So I was having a very tough period of time and decided that I would find my grounding by learning masonry and then building a pizza oven. But I forgot to learn physics. And so I built a pizza oven that looked like the pizza ovens at the pizzeria. And what happens is you build a fire in a square box and the heat goes to the top. So the roof was 900 degrees and the floor was cool enough to put my hand on. And now if you Google it or Perplexity it, you will see that it has to have an arch on the top because then the heat goes up and around and it works. And so my second pizza oven does that. But this idea of leaning into the craft of what are we going to spend our time to make as opposed to doing our job is really important, because back when I was younger, I had to do my job. And I found that other people weren't always treating my work that I had done my job with sufficient respect, and they were keeping most of the value that was created. And I decided that my job should be to figure out what I'm supposed to do next, not wait for someone to tell me.
One last question. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, Evan.
Let's go to Stephanie. I'm sorry, Andy, we won't be able to get to you. You're welcome to put it in the chat if you want. Stephanie, keep it brief. Great to see
Hi,
you.
Stephanie.
Oops.
Oh no, mute.
Take yourself off mute.
Sorry, too excited. I'm from Jamaica, Seth. I'm a student of Debbie Millman. I went to the Masters in Branding program in New York 10 years ago. That's where I met you and your work. And then I followed Chip after. I'm so nervous to be here. I'm fanning. Okay, my question really is that unfillable hole. I just want to transport you back to that moment where you felt that and you said to yourself, I have this unfillable hole, because it connected with me immediately. Yeah. What did you do next?
I stopped going to TED.
You stopped going to?
To TED.
The TED conference.
The TED
conference.
Right? Like I had
explain.
Okay, so the TED conference is for fancy people. And I went the first time, there were 300 people there, it grew. And Chris is a dear friend, and lots of the TEDsters are dear friends of mine. But what I found when I was in that room with all those fancy people is no matter who I was talking to, they were looking over my shoulder to see if there was someone better to talk to. And when you give a TED talk and you're live and you know it's going to be on video, no matter how many people in the room are getting it, there's someone over there who's not getting it. And it's so easy to just aim your energy at the person who's sitting at the wrong talk, that I might be wrong, but they might be in the wrong place. I'm not sure which, but I know that I was attracted to fixing that I wanted to make sure that I felt secure, surrounded by people who I hoped would be my peers.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I will have to keep doing this forever because this hole's never going to get filled. I'm at TED, for God's sake. And I said, I can't come back here because I don't have the resilience and the ability to resist it. I just need to build a life for myself where I can be generative and a contribution and not need to use other people's short-term feedback as fuel for me to do the work.
Okay.
Thank you. Stephanie, find places where people are present with you. That is the key.
Like MEA.
Like MEA. Go to places where people are present and are going to be deep in conversation with you. That is, so check out MEA, but most importantly, check out Seth's new book. And let's go ahead and put the link to it here in the chat again.
There's
and
a picture
Seth,
inside.
The picture right there, there's, the best thing about Seth's books is like they are an easy read. I used to call Seth's books plain books meaning not plain P-L-I-N, they're P-L-A-N-E because you can read it on a plane from one place to the next and finish it. So love you, my friend. So good
Thank
to
you
see
so
so good to
much.
see you, Evan. Thank you for joining us. And Seth, I'll see you one of these days.
Can't wait. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carrie. You guys are
Thank
the
you,
best.
everybody. So you
Keep
will get
making
the
a ruckus.
recording of this. It'll be on our website. And thank you both. And thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. And we'll take you back out with a little more jazz from Seth.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.